The rain in Manhattan didn't wash the city clean. It just made the grime slicker, turning the streets into black mirrors that reflected the neon anxiety of the evening. From the 45th floor of his penthouse, Lucas Thorne watched the storm batter the glass. The silence in the apartment was heavy, the kind that expensive furniture and high ceilings did nothing to alleviate. He checked his watch. 8:15 p.m. Maya was late. Lucas pours himself a finger of scotch, an aged Macallan that cost more than his father had made in a year. He swirled the amber liquid, trying to calm the tremor in his hand. His daughter had called him 3 hours ago, her voice tight, breathless, asking if she could come over. She said it was urgent. She said they needed to talk about the wedding. The wedding. It was the only thing tethering Lucas to sanity these days. Since Maya had gotten engaged to Preston Vander Hoven, scion of one of the oldest banking families in the East Coast, Lucas had felt a growing chasm between him and his daughter. He was the checkbook, the architect who built skyscrapers but still had calluses on his hands. They were the heritage, the people who owned the sky without ever touching a brick. The elevator chimed, a soft, polite sound that echoed through the foyer. Lucas set his glass down and straightened his blazer. He wanted to look like the father she needed, strong, capable, present. Maya stepped out. She looked beautiful, but pale. She was wearing a trench coat that was buttoned all the way to her chin, her hair damp from the dash from her car to the lobby. She didn't smile. "Dad." The word hung in the air, fragile. "Maya." Lucas walked over, opening his arms for a hug, but she stayed planted by the door. His arms fell to his sides. "Is everything okay? Is it Preston?" "Preston is fine," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She refused to make eye contact, focusing instead on the abstract painting hanging behind him. We need to talk about the ceremony." Lucas felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. "The date?" "I told you, I can clear my schedule for whatever you need. I know the venue in waiting is..." "It's done, Dad." The silence that followed was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator, the drumming of the rain, it all ceased. "What do you mean, done?" Lucas asked, his voice dangerously steady. Maya finally looked at him. Her eyes were rimmed with red, but there was a steeliness in them, a defensive wall she had inherited from her mother, Evelyn. "We got married yesterday, Dad, in Connecticut." Lucas blinked, processing the words. "Yesterday?" He let out a short, confused laugh. "But the invitations haven't even gone out. We were discussing the guest list last week." "It changed, Dad," Maya said, clutching her purse tighter. "Preston's father, there were security concerns, political exposure. The press was sniffing around. We had to make a decision fast. It had to be incredibly small, intimate."
"I'm your father," Lucas said, the hurt finally cracking his voice. "I'm not the press. I'm not the public. I'm your father." Maya took a step back, as if his pain were a physical force pushing her away. "I know, and believe me, this kills me. But the Vanderhovens, they have rules. It was a ceremony strictly for the inner circle, the godparents, the immediate lineage." "And I'm not immediate lineage?" Lucas stepped forward, his anger flaring. "I paid for your education. I paid for that apartment you live in. I held you when you cried over your first heartbreak. How am I not immediate?" "It wasn't about love, Dad," Maya snapped, her voice rising for the first time. "It was about fit. It was... God, this is so hard to explain." She took a deep breath, composing herself, putting that patrician mask back on. "The wedding was yesterday, and it was just for special people. Just for special people." The phrase hit Lucas like a physical blow. It wasn't just a rejection, it was a classification. It was the culmination of every dinner party where his jokes were too loud, every gala where his tuxedo didn't fit quite right, every look his ex-wife Evelyn had ever given him that said, "You are useful, but you are not one of us." Special people, Lucas repeated, the taste of the words bitter on his tongue. "Please, don't make this harder than it is," Maya pleaded, her eyes watering again, though Lucas couldn't tell if it was guilt or just the stress of managing him. "We're going to have a party later in the year, for everyone. For you, for your friends from the firm. It will be fun. But the sacrament, that had to be protected." "Protected from me," Lucas whispered. "No." She lied. He could see it. It was a clumsy lie. Protected from the chaos. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet box. "I wanted you to know first, before it hits the papers next week." "You're leaving?" "Preston is waiting downstairs. We're heading to the airport. Honeymoon." Lucas looked at his daughter. Really looked at her. She was 24, glowing with the sheen of immense wealth, standing in the home he bought, wearing clothes he paid for, telling him he wasn't special enough to watch her say, "I do." "Go," Lucas said. He turned his back to her, walking toward the window. "Dad, please." "Go, Maya." He heard the hesitation in her steps, the soft click of her heels on the marble, and finally the chime of the elevator doors closing. Lucas stood alone in the dark apartment. The rain lashed against the glass, a chaotic, uninvited guest. He reached for his scotch and downed it in one burn. He felt hollowed out, but beneath the grief, there was something else, a nagging dissonance. Maya said it was small. She said it was political. He pulled out his phone. He stared at the blank screen. His wife, Julianne, hadn't texted him since she landed in Paris 2 days ago for Fashion Week. He needed her voice. He needed someone to tell him that he was worthy, that he mattered. He dialed Julianne's number. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Julianne. I'm in Europe and unavailable. Leave a message." Lucas lowered his phone. The city lights blurred below him. "Just for special people," he murmured to the empty room. He didn't know it yet, but the definition of that phrase was about to destroy everything he thought he knew about his life.
The week that followed Maya's confession did not pass. It dragged, heavy and viscous, like wet concrete setting around Lucas's ankles. Lucas went to work. That was what he did. He was a man of routine, a man who believed that if you simply kept stacking bricks, eventually you would have a wall strong enough to keep the chaos out. His firm, Thorne and Associates, occupied 3 floors of a steel and glass tower in Midtown. From his corner office, he could see the skeletal frame of a new high-rise his team was designing near Hudson Yards. Usually, the sight filled him with a rugged pride, the tangible proof that he, a boy from the Rust Belt of Ohio, had left a mark on the greatest city on Earth. Now the skyline just looked like a row of jagged teeth. "Lucas, you with us?" Lucas blinked, snapping back to the conference room. His junior partner David was looking at him with concern. On the screen, a 3D render of a cantilevered balcony rotated slowly. "Sorry, the load-bearing capacity on the south terrace. Check it again. The wind shear at that altitude is unforgiving." "We checked it twice, Lucas. It's solid," David said, clicking his pen. He hesitated, then lowered his voice, shifting from professional to personal. "You look tired, boss. Everything okay with the wedding prep? It's coming up next month, right?" The question hit Lucas in the chest, a dull ache that radiated outward. Next month. That was the lie he had been telling everyone. That was the decoy Maya gave him to tell his friends, his colleagues, the people who weren't special enough to know the truth. Lucas looked at the faces around the table, bright, ambitious architects who looked up to him. If he told them the truth, that his daughter had married into American royalty yesterday without him, that he had been discarded like a contractor who had finished the job, he would see the pity in their eyes. He could handle hatred. He could handle envy. He could not handle pity. "It's moving along," Lucas lied, his voice flat. "Just logistics. You know how women get about the details."
He hated himself for the misogynistic crutch, for the easy deflection. He hated that he was protecting Maya's reputation at the cost of his own dignity. "Well, if you need to take off early to fly Julianne out or something, let us know," David said, grinning. "How is Paris, by the way? I saw her Instagram story of a croissant. Looked amazing." "Paris is Paris," Lucas said, shuffling the papers in front of him to signal the end of the meeting. "She's enjoying the break." When the room cleared, Lucas sat alone in the Levitt chair, the silence of the office pressing in on him. He picked up his phone. No new messages. Julianne had left for Paris 3 days before Maya's revelation. She had claimed she needed space, a week to attend the shows and recharge before the chaos of the wedding began. Lucas had encouraged it. He had given her his boundless credit card and a kiss on the forehead, grateful that his young, vibrant wife wanted to look her best for his daughter's big day. Now the irony tasted like bile. He dialed her number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Again. He opened his text thread with her. "Me. Miss you. Just checking in. How's the weather?" Julianne. "Raining. So busy with the galleries. Love you. XX." It was generic. Impersonal. It was the kind of text you sent to a distant relative, not a husband of 5 years. He stood up and walked to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. He tried to rationalize the silence. "She's busy," he told himself. "She's 28. She's in Paris. She's living the life I gave her." But a darker thought, an intrusive whisper began to curl in the back of his mind. Why hadn't she called? Not once. Not a FaceTime to show him a dress? Not a 5-minute voice call to complain about her feet hurting from walking the cobblestones? Just texts? Just emojis?
And Maya. Lucas hadn't spoken to his daughter since she walked out of his elevator. He had almost called her a dozen times, his thumb hovering over her name. He wanted to scream at her. He wanted to beg her. He wanted to ask her if Preston Vanderhoven held her hand the way he used to when she was scared of the dark. But he didn't call. He was paralyzed by a terrifying realization. If I call and she doesn't answer, it confirms I have lost her completely. As long as he didn't dial, there was a Schrodinger's cat possibility that she still loved him, that she was just overwhelmed. Wednesday bled into Thursday. The apartment became a tomb. Lucas stopped eating properly, surviving on takeout coffee and the expensive scotch. He found himself wandering into the guest room where Maya used to stay when she visited from college. It was pristine, untouched. On the bedside table, there was a framed photo from 10 years ago. Lucas and Maya on a boat in the Hamptons. He was tanned, laughing, pointing at the horizon. Maya was 14, leaning her head on his shoulder, looking at him with absolute adoration. Just for special people. The phrase replayed in his mind, a broken record. By Friday evening, the isolation had turned into a physical weight. Lucas sat in his living room, the lights off, the city glow illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. The sudden noise made him jump. It was Julianne. A call. Finally. Lucas snatched the phone up, his heart hammering. "Jules?" "Hey, Lucas." Her voice was bright, airy, but there was a tinny quality to it, a bad connection. "It's fine. I was getting worried. Are you okay?" "I'm great. Just tired. So much walking." "I miss you, Lucas." His voice cracked slightly. He wanted to tell her about Maya. He needed to tell someone. "Jules, something happened with Maya." There was a pause on the line, a beat too long. "What happened?" she asked. Her tone didn't shift to concern. It shifted to caution. She got married, already, without me." "What?" Julian's voice went up an octave. That's crazy, Lucas. When?" "Monday. She came over and told me. Said it was just for special people. Can you believe that?" Lucas ran a hand through his hair, desperate for her outrage, for her to be on his side. "Oh, Lucas, that's wow. That's it? Wow? No, I mean, it's terrible, obviously." She sounded distracted.
In the background, Lucas could hear music, not the accordion music of a Parisian street, but the heavy, thumping bass of a sound system. And laughter. American laughter. "Where are you, Jules?" Lucas asked, frowning. "I told you I'm at a little bistro near the hotel. It's happy hour." "It's 2 a.m. in Paris, Julianne." The silence on the other end was sharp, sudden. "It's a late-night bistro," she said, her voice hardening. "Look, Lucas, I can't really hear you. The signal is breaking up. I'm so sorry about Maya. We'll talk when I get back on Sunday, okay? You need to sleep. You sound paranoid." "Paranoid?" "I have to go. Love you." Click. She hung up. Lucas stared at the phone. The screen went black, reflecting his own haggard face. Paranoid. She had called him paranoid. He sat there for a long time, the silence of the penthouse rushing back in to fill the void left by her voice. He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her, because if he didn't, the alternative was that his entire reality was dissolving. He stood up and walked to his laptop sitting open on the dining table. He woke the screen. He didn't know what he was looking for. He just opened a browser. He typed in Hoven wedding. Nothing. Just old engagement announcements. He typed in Hoven Hamptons. Nothing. The blackout was effective. Mai was right. They had scrubbed it clean. It was a ghost event. Lucas closed the laptop. He felt like a man trapped in a glass box, screaming at people who couldn't see him. He poured another drink. Sunday was coming. Julianne would be home. Maya would be on her honeymoon. He just had to survive the weekend. He just had to get through the silence. But as Lucas took a sip of the burning liquid, he didn't know that the silence is about to be broken, not by a voice, but by a glitch in the matrix, a digital crack that would let the light in and reveal the monsters hiding in the dark.
Sunday arrived, bringing a crystalline, indifferent sunlight that cut through the perpetual gloom of Lucas's penthouse. It was the day Julianne was due back from Paris, a fact that Lucas dreaded and yearned for in equal measure. He knew the moment she walked through the door, he would have to either confess his heartbreak about Maya or challenge the shaky foundation of her business trip. Both options felt like detonating the last remaining support beams of his life. He hadn't slept. He lay on the couch in his office, his shirt wrinkled and the scent of stale scotch clinging to the Italian leather. His phone was dead. He plugged it in, watching the familiar Apple logo glow to life. The first wave of notifications hit him. Work emails, stock updates, news headlines, all irrelevant. He opened Instagram, not to post or engage, but simply to lose himself in the mindless, aspirational scrolling of the feed. He saw a photo of an associate's new yacht, another of a colleague's Tuscan vacation. It was the gilded cage of his social sphere, a world where everyone pretended to be perfectly happy, successful, and invited. He was about to close the app when an unsolicited pop-up advertisement caught his eye. It was for a high-end wedding planning service in the Hamptons. He ignored it, but his eye snagged on the fine print below a stunning image of a floral archway, dripping with white orchids and rare roses. The caption read, "Inspired by the grandeur of the Hoven Preston ceremony? Let us make your dream a reality. Hashtag Hamptons Nuptials. Hashtag Society's Finest." Lucas froze. The Macallan in his system, which had been numbing his pain, now acted like a cold shot of adrenaline. Hoven Preston ceremony. He tapped the image, his thumb moving with a sudden, surgical precision that belied his week of emotional paralysis. The image led not to a planner's portfolio, but to the Instagram page of a minor regional lifestyle magazine, Long Island Life. The magazine, far less guarded than the established Town and Country or Vogue, had posted a behind-the-scenes photo dump that had somehow escaped the Hoven family's aggressive digital lockdown. The gallery opened. Lucas saw the first photo, an aerial shot of a massive, custom-built glass marquee erected on an immaculate green lawn stretching down to the ocean. There were rows upon rows of pristine white chairs, hundreds of them, angled toward a towering chippa woven with thousands of hand-cut blossoms.
Caterers in black ties moved among the crowds. Musicians played violins beneath crystal chandeliers. It was not small. It was not private. It was a royal wedding disguised as an American society gala. The blood drained from Lucas's face, leaving a cold, metallic taste in his mouth. Maya had told him it was a swift, simple exchange of vows in a registry office in Connecticut. This was a spectacle. This was a statement. This was the social event of the year that cost more than Lucas's first 3 houses combined. Just for special people.
The words no longer sounded like a tearful apology. They sounded like a declaration of war. Lucas clicked through the photos, a detached, terrifying calmness settling over him. He was no longer grieving, he was collecting evidence. Photo 2. A panoramic shot of the dinner reception. Dozens of round tables covered in silk, silver place settings gleaming under soft gold lighting. Lucas recognized the space, the private, exclusive ballroom of the Hoven estate. Photo 4. The head table. Preston, the groom, was smiling broadly. Next to him, Maya, radiant in a bespoke gown that looked like liquid starlight. And next to them, Evelyn, his ex-wife, looking smug and triumphant in emerald green. And standing proudly at the other end of the table, making a champagne toast, was Preston's father, a man Lucas had once met briefly at a charity gala, a man who possessed the kind of chilly charisma that comes only with inherited power. The truth of the exclusion was now undeniable. Lucas was not excluded for political reasons or security fears. He was excluded because the combined forces of the Vanderhovens and his ex-wife had deemed him unworthy of the spectacle. He was the wrong class, the wrong origin, the wrong father. He felt the familiar surge of pain, but this time it was sharp, clean, and directed outward. The grief for his daughter had been replaced by a surgical rage toward the conspirators. Then, in photo 7, a candid shot of the cocktail hour, posted by the magazine's junior photographer, the true shock struck, the betrayal that redefined the word. In the blurred background, near a bar decorated with towering ice sculptures, stood a woman. Her silhouette was unmistakable. The sleek, dark hair, the confident stance, the sharp cut of the dress. Julianne. She was not in Paris. She was standing barely 50 feet from the groom's table. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting casually on the arm of a tall, silver-haired man. Lucas zoomed in until the pixels broke apart into jagged squares of color, but there was no doubt. It was Julianne. The dress, a shimmering sapphire that contrasted perfectly with the Hamptons landscape, was one he had bought her for a gala last Christmas. The watch sparkling on her wrist was his gift from their honeymoon. And the man? The man was older, handsome in a predatory way with the unmistakable bearing of old New York money. Lucas didn't recognize him at first glance, but the sheer audacity of the lie, Paris, the quiet, the dismissal of his feelings, it all coalesced into a cold, terrifying certainty. Julianne hadn't been on a business trip. She had been a guest at the wedding. Lucas's hands, which had built empires out of steel and glass, began to tremble violently. The air in the expensive penthouse seemed to thin, making it difficult to breathe. He felt a sudden, profound vertigo, the sensation of his entire life being flipped upside down. The betrayal was twofold. Maya had rejected him, but Julianne had used the rejection as a cover. She was not just cheating, she was cheating with someone at the very heart of the elite circle that had excluded him. Lucas closed the photo gallery and let the phone drop onto the desk. It landed with a soft, final thud. His grief was gone, his paranoia was justified. The architecture of his family life was not just cracked, it had been demolished by a coordinated strike. He was no longer Lucas Thorne, the hurt father. He was Lucas Thorne, the man who had been played. He knew in that precise moment that the next move would not be dictated by emotion, but by cold, calculated revenge. He had all week to wait for Julianne's return, and the game was about to begin.
Monday morning arrived, cold and indifferent, but Lucas felt nothing of the despair that had characterized the preceding week. The discovery on Sunday had performed a strange sort of alchemy on his soul, freezing the messy chaos of grief and forging a hard, glittering shell of resolve. He was no longer a victim. He was an intelligence operative in his own home. He was in his office at 6 a.m., hours before his partners arrived. The silence here was different from the silence of his penthouse. It was functional, containing the immense potential energy of his firm. He sat at his custom-built walnut desk, which felt like the command center it was. His first call was not to an attorney, but to Richard, a trusted former intelligence operative who now ran a quiet, high-end private security and investigation firm Lucas often used for sensitive corporate due diligence. "I need a clean job, Richard. Nothing traceable, nothing on paper," Lucas instructed, his voice low and devoid of inflection. He emailed Richard the low-resolution image from the Long Island Life magazine, circling Julianne and the man beside her. "The woman is Julianne, my wife. She was supposed to be in Paris. I need to know everything about the man she's with, and I need a detailed timeline of her actual movements from last Tuesday to yesterday. Every receipt, every reservation, every cellular ping, cross-referenced with the Vanderhoven event schedule." Richard, accustomed to the veiled dramas of the financial elite, simply replied, "Give me 4 hours, Lucas," and a large retainer. While Richard began his digital excavation, Lucas turned his attention to his own internal battlefield. He accessed his joint accounts and corporate credit cards, focusing on Julianne's Amex Black. He wasn't looking for infidelity in the abstract, he was looking for complicity. The Paris trail was there, charges for business-class flights, a luxury hotel on Rue Saint-Honoré, and a few high-end designer boutiques. But interwoven with the French currency were incongruous domestic charges. Saturday, 11:30 a.m., car service, Hampton Jitney, $450. Saturday, 2 p.m., boutique East Hampton, NY, $1,800. Saturday, 7 p.m., restaurant Southampton, $750. Julianne had flown to Paris on Tuesday, checked into the hotel, and then flew back on a private or discreet commercial flight on Friday evening, made it to the Hamptons on Saturday morning, attended the wedding, and then presumably flew back to Paris on Sunday morning to return to New York on schedule. She had paid for 2 extra round-trip transatlantic flights and a weekend of high-end local spending just to maintain the elaborate cover story. This was not a spontaneous indiscretion. This was a calculated financial investment in a double life. Precisely 4 hours later, Richard's encrypted file landed in Lucas's inbox. The dossier was concise and devastating. The man was Alistair Vanderhoven, 42, the older brother of the groom Preston. He was a notorious venture capitalist with a reputation for sharp elbows, ruthless deal-making, and a history of divorces that left behind scorched earth.
The report confirmed Julianne's movements. She had indeed been in the Hamptons for the entirety of Saturday, staying at Alistair's secondary estate under an assumed name. The report also contained an analysis of Julianne's social interactions on encrypted chat applications, revealing frequent, lengthy correspondence with both Alistair and, perhaps more tellingly, with Evelyn Thorne, Lucas's ex-wife. The narrative snapped into razor-sharp focus. Evelyn had not just excluded Lucas, she had outsourced him. She and Alistair, likely motivated by a mix of social contempt and financial opportunity, had leveraged Julianne, Lucas's own wife, to not only keep him away from the wedding, but also to gain insights into his firm's structure, his deals, and his net worth. The true betrayal was not lust, but transaction. Julianne, ambitious and greedy, was attempting to trade up, exchanging the self-made, emotionally dependent Lucas for the cold, inherited power of Alistair. And the wedding, the supposed sacrament of his daughter's life, had been the stage for the final exchange of assets. Lucas leaned back in his chair, the weight of the Vanderhoven-Thorne conspiracy settling over him. He felt an intense, focused clarity. His life had been reduced to a structural failure, and as an architect, his only response was to engineer its complete and calculated collapse. He pulled up his company's legal defense fund, authorizing a significant transfer. He didn't want a divorce, he wanted a demolition. Julianne was due to arrive at JFK at 4 p.m. Lucas knew she would come home tired, smelling faintly of duty-free perfume, expecting a grateful, needy husband. She would expect to lie to him one last time before slipping back into the mundane routine. He walked out of his office, instructing David that he was taking a sabbatical, effective immediately. He left the glittering tower behind, feeling lighter than he had in years. The man who had been rejected as not special was preparing to prove just how terrifyingly special he could be when driven by betrayal. He arrived home before noon. The penthouse was pristine. He went straight to the liquor cabinet and pulled out the Macallan. He didn't pour himself a drink. He unscrewed the cap and walked into the bedroom. Julian's suitcase, the expensive new Samsonite he had bought her for the Paris trip, was still hidden in the closet. He placed the Macallan bottle on her side of the bed, right next to the pillow she would sleep on. He would be waiting.
The elevator chime at 4:18 p.m. on Sunday was the sound of a guillotine blade being released. Lucas was already standing in the foyer, not pacing, but simply waiting, a statue of granite calm. He was dressed in a clean, starched shirt, his beard freshly trimmed. He had stripped himself of the outward appearance of the grieving, paranoid husband. He was the objective observer, the witness. Julianne stepped into the penthouse. She looked impeccable, the very picture of jet-set exhaustion. She wore a tailored taupe blazer, expensive denim, and sunglasses that hid half her face. She smelled faintly of cold air, airport tarmac, and a new, sharp French perfume. The expensive perfume, Lucas knew from Richard's report, had been purchased at the Paris airport after she returned from the Hamptons. "Lucas! God, I missed you." She moved toward him, leaning in for a kiss. Her lips were dry, her embrace rushed. Lucas allowed the contact, feeling nothing but the stiffness of her borrowed armor. "Welcome home, Jules," he said, his voice warm, almost tender. He retrieved the large Samsonite suitcase, the one that had secretly contained a gown fit for a society wedding. "God, I'm shattered," Julianne sighed, kicking off her Louboutins. "The shows were insane, and the travel, you know how it is." "I know," Lucas replied, carrying the suitcase into the walk-in closet. He paused by the bedside table, where the bottle of Macallan sat, gleaming in the afternoon light. He waited for her to notice it, for her to question the misplaced, foreign object. Julianne walked straight past it, heading for the bathroom. She paused only to look at her reflection. "How was your week? Did you manage to get any sleep after Maya's news?" Lucas followed her, leaning against the doorframe. "I managed. It was a shock, Julianne. A real shock." He let the word shock hang there, hoping it might resonate with the magnitude of the lie she was currently living. It felt strange. My own daughter, lying to me. Julianne emerged, dabbing her face with a towel. She looked genuinely sympathetic now, playing the role of the supportive spouse. "I know, honey, it's awful, but she's young, and those Vanderhovens, they're a lot. Maybe she was scared she'd embarrass them. You know how she is about appearances." Appearances. Yes, that seems to be everything to them. He watched her walk to the closet and begin the rote unpacking of her Paris clothes. He needed to push her narrative. "Tell me about it. Paris. What was the highlight? Did you manage to see the new restoration at the Louvre?"
Julianne frowned slightly, but quickly recovered with a dazzling smile. "Oh, the Louvre was packed, darling. Absolutely packed. I actually skipped the museums and just did a lot of small galleries in the Marais. You know me, I prefer the emerging artists. Plus, the political scene there right now is just explosive. Felt so good to finally be out of the American bubble." The political scene. A reference she could have read in any headline. Lucas moved closer to the closet. "Did you see anyone interesting? Anyone familiar?
It's a small world when you're traveling high-end, Julianne. You never know who you might bump into. Julianne paused, holding up a silk slip. Nope, not a soul. Just the usual European fashion set. Why? Were you hoping I'd run into an old flame of yours? She chuckled, a light, teasing sound. No, Lucas said, reaching out to gently touch the silk slip. Just wondering if you might have run into any of Maya's new in-laws. They're influential. They travel. A fraction of a second too late, Julian's eyes darted toward the suitcase. She hadn't expected him to be so focused. Oh, those people, she dismissed with a wave of her hand. No, thank God. I'm trying to avoid that whole social orbit, Lucas. Too much pressure, too much old money pretension. Alistair van der Hoven, for instance. You didn't happen to see him? He's a venture capitalist. Busy man. Maybe he was conducting business in Paris. The smile slipped from Julianne's face. It was a subtle shift, a barely perceptible stiffening of the jawline. She turned back to the closet, busying her hands. Alistair? No, never heard of him. Look, Lucas, I really need a shower. I feel gross. Can we finish this later? Of course, Lucas said, finally moving away from the closet. He walked to the bed, picking up the Macallan bottle. He turned it slowly in his hands. Julianne was already halfway to the bathroom. What's that? Did you finally break into the good stuff? This, Lucas said, his eyes fixed on the amber liquid. This is the bottle I bought to celebrate my daughter's engagement. He let the sentence hang, weighted with false nostalgia. And you know how I am, Julianne. I never break open a Macallan unless I have something big to celebrate. Or something big to mourn. Julianne stopped at the bathroom door. She looked at the bottle, then at Lucas's eyes. She saw the absolute terrifying stillness in his posture. For the first time since she walked in, the mask she wore fractured. She sensed perhaps that the man standing before her was not the grieving husband she had left, but something far more dangerous. Lucas, you're scaring me, she said. Am I? He asked, tilting the bottle to catch the last rays of the sun. The light gleamed, blindingly. Then tell me, Julianne, tell me why you felt compelled to buy a new dress at a boutique in the Hamptons on the same day you were supposedly watching a fashion show in Paris. The silence in the penthouse, once born of grief, now held the crackle of a high-voltage wire.
Julianne froze at the bathroom door. The question, precise, sudden, and supported by irrefutable facts, left her without a stage for the theatrical denial she had prepared. Her complexion, usually vibrant, turned a shade of sickly white that even her expensive makeup could not mask. Julian, don't be ridiculous, she finally managed, forcing a small, brittle laugh. I bought a scarf at a little place on the way back from the airport. I must have mixed up the receipts. Lucas lowered the Macallan bottle, placing it gently on the floor beside his feet. He reached into the inner pocket of his blazer and slowly withdrew a single sheet of glossy photographic paper, folded neatly in half. The boutique was called The Seamstress's Dream, Julianne. They specialize in evening wear, and the receipt I pulled from your expense report matches a gown that would require a fitting, not a scarf. He unfolded the photograph and held it out, not angrily, but with the cold, detached presentation of a defense lawyer. And this is the high-resolution photo from the wedding. You look lovely in sapphire, by the way. I remember buying that fabric for you last year. Julianne did not take the photo, her eyes fixed on the image, the bright, cruel evidence of her laughter, her intimate posture, and the presence of the man beside her. It was a mistake, she whispered, her hands starting to tremble. A stupid, drunken mistake. A mistake that required 2 additional transatlantic flights, a week of manufactured alibis, and the meticulous deletion of your entire social media history for 3 days? That's not a mistake, Julianne. That's a strategy. Who is Alistair van der Hoven?
The mention of the name broke her. The composure that had sustained her double life evaporated, replaced by a sudden violent defensiveness. She lunged forward, grabbing the photo and tearing it in two. He's a man who isn't obsessed with blueprints in concrete. He actually knows what's happening outside of your antiseptic little tower. Alistair is Preston's older brother, the venture capitalist. I know that. I also know that he's currently circling two of my biggest infrastructure clients, and I know that you, Julianne, suddenly became very interested in the confidential details of the Thorne initiative 6 weeks ago. Lucas didn't move. He let the silence work on her, allowing her own guilt to suffocate her. This wasn't about sex, was it? Lucas said, the question sounding like a eulogy for their marriage. It was a business deal. You traded my pillow talk for a seat at the Hoven table?
Julianne slumped onto the edge of the bed, defeated. The anger drained out, leaving only the ugly, naked truth. You were stagnant, Lucas. You peaked 10 years ago. This marriage, this life, it was a gilded cage. You kept me here, safe and polished, but you refused to introduce me to the real power, the people who matter, the special people. She looked up, her eyes blazing with self-pity and entitlement. Alistair doesn't need me to look pretty on his arm. He needs me because I was married to you. Evelyn offered me the connection. She said she was doing me a favor, getting me out before you dragged me down with you. Evelyn, Lucas repeated, the name tasting like ash. So my ex-wife and my current wife conspired against me, to exclude me from my daughter's wedding and strip me of my assets. A perfect union. It was a transaction, Julianne insisted, scrubbing tears from her face. Alistair needed your client list to undermine a bid. Evelyn needed you out of the picture for Maya's image, and she promised Alistair access. I was the key, Lucas. I finally had leverage. Lucas walked to the closet and pulled out her Hampton suitcase, the one still full of clean Paris clothes waiting to be put away. He unzipped it and tossed the entire contents onto the floor. You speak of leverage, Julianne, but you failed to calculate the cost of my leverage. He took out his phone and pressed a button. The sound of a sterile female voice filled the room, amplified through the penthouse speakers. The Thorne account is hereby notified that all assets, including but not limited to properties, vehicles, and credit facilities held jointly or individually by Julianne Thorne are now subject to immediate lien and foreclosure, effective immediately, pending civil litigation brought by Lucas Thorne. It was the legal notification he had prepared on Monday, activated 5 minutes ago. Julianne sprang up, hysteria taking over. What did you do? You can't. We're married. I have rights. You had rights until you signed 3 separate non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements pertaining to my corporate affairs, and you violated every one of them. You didn't just cheat on me, Julianne. You committed corporate espionage. He looked at the ruin of the room, the ruin of his marriage. The anger was gone, replaced by a devastating, cold finality. The real tragedy here, Julianne, he said, his voice dropping to a low, unforgiving rumble, is that you believed you needed Alistair or Evelyn to be special. You were wrong. You just needed to be loyal. But you chose transaction over love, and in my world, that choice comes with a catastrophic penalty. Lucas pulled a small, sealed envelope from his pocket. A one-way plane ticket. A car will take you to JFK. I had it rerouted from Paris. You can stay in the hotel room you booked there before flying to the Hamptons. My lawyers will contact yours tomorrow. Take whatever you can carry, and do not, under any circumstances, contact me or my daughter again. Julianne stood amidst the discarded remnants of her fake life, her face contorted in a mixture of rage and terror. She looked utterly lost, a woman who had gambled everything on a lie and discovered the house always wins. Lucas turned and walked out of the bedroom, leaving her to the silence and the wreckage. The first layer of betrayal had been purged, but the second, the rejection by his own daughter, still festered. He still had a call to make.
The apartment was still, a perfect vacuum of noise and emotion. Lucas stood in the doorway of the bedroom,
watching the chaotic pile of Julianne's expensive clothes and the Macallan bottle, now his only silent witness. The wreckage was physical, but the cleansing had begun. He walked to his private study. The clock on his desk read 7:30 p.m. Maya would be enjoying cocktail hour somewhere tropical, the glow of newlywed bliss masking the deeper fractures of her conscience. He needed to strike when she was relaxed, when the mask of the dutiful, grateful bride was easiest to shatter. Lucas didn't call her number. He initiated a video conference through a generic encrypted app, a protocol he often used for sensitive corporate communication. This was not a father-daughter chat. It was a deposition. After 3 rings, Maya answered. The background was blindingly bright, white sand, turquoise water, and the rustle of palm fronds. She was wearing a loose cotton cover-up, her hair damp and her face slightly sunburned. Her initial smile was hesitant, forced. "Dad, hi. I can't talk long. Preston is—" She trailed off, glancing over her shoulder. "Preston is irrelevant, Maya," Lucas cut in, his voice flat, emotionless. The distance, the clarity, was jarring to her. "I'm not calling to wish you a happy honeymoon. I'm calling about the truth." Maya's jaw clenched. She tried to look away, but the image held her captive. "I told you the truth, Dad. It was small, private, political." Lucas picked up the single printed photo, the high-resolution image of the gala, and held it up to the camera. He didn't focus on Julianne this time. He zoomed in on the sheer scale of the marquee, the hundreds of guests, the ostentatious floral arrangements. "This is not small, Maya. This is a $5 million spectacle. This is the cover of Town and Country. You lied to me." Maya's jaw clenched. She tried to look away, but the image held her captive. "I was told I had to. Evelyn said I had to protect you. You wouldn't—" "I know the line. But that wasn't the whole lie, was it, Maya? Because I found Julianne in the cocktail photos." The video feed froze for a tense, unbearable moment. Maya's lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked less like a newlywed and more like a captured soldier. "She was there," Lucas pressed on, allowing the silence to accuse her. "She was there with Alistair Vanderhoven, Preston's brother. They were working with your mother to keep me out and to use Julianne to access my business secrets."
"I didn't know about the business," Maya cried out, tears welling up instantly. "I swear I didn't know about Julianne and Alistair. But Mom and Alistair's lawyer, they said that if you came, you would talk too loud. You would drink too much, you would tell a story about building a bridge or a factory, and you would ruin the narrative the Vanderhovens were building." She was sobbing now, a raw, ugly sound that shook her small frame. "I had a choice, Dad. My whole life has been about getting to that table. I was told that if you came, they would pull the funding for Preston's political campaign. Mom said you were an obstacle." Lucas listened to the anguished confession, feeling a bone-deep weariness, not rage. This was the ultimate betrayal. She had willingly, consciously, weighed her father against a political campaign and social acceptance, and found him wanting. "You chose them," Lucas stated, his voice devoid of accusation, which made it the all more devastating. "You didn't choose Preston. You chose the Vanderhoven name. You chose the narrative." "I was trying to protect my future," she pleaded. "I was trying to protect the marriage. I love Preston." "No, you love the security that Preston represents. And you allowed the 2 people closest to me, your mother and Julianne, to conspire to humiliate me and steal from me, all because you feared I would stain your perfect photograph." He looked at the young woman on the screen, seeing only Evelyn's cold calculation beneath Maya's tears. The daughter he loved was gone, replaced by a polished, transactional stranger.
I need you to understand something, Maya, Lucas said, reaching for his Macallan bottle one last time. He held it up to the camera. For 30 years, I gave you my resources, my heart, and my unconditional love. I built you a pedestal. But when you chose the special people, you forfeited your claim to me. He lowered the bottle. Your mother and Julianne are facing the financial and legal consequences of their actions. They traded information for status, and they lost. You, Maya, made the same trade. You exchanged your father for a name. What are you saying? Maya whispered, the sound terrified. Dad, don't do this. I'm your daughter. I am saying that I will always love the memory of the little girl who held my hand on the boat. But the woman who married Preston Vanderhoven yesterday and who watched me suffer for a week while she knew the truth, I don't know her, and I will not fund her life of deception. Lucas leaned in close to the camera, his final words delivered with the weight of absolute finality. Enjoy your honeymoon, Maya. The trust fund I set up for you has been frozen. Everything you have for me ends today. You wanted the Vanderhoven legacy. You have it now. You are one of them. He did not wait for her reply, for her sobs, or for her inevitable plea for forgiveness. Lucas hit the end call button. The screen went black. He set the phone down and looked at the cold, empty spaces of his penthouse. The betrayal was complete. The house was clean.
3 weeks had passed since Julianne's hasty departure and Maya's tearful, futile video plea from the tropics. Lucas Thorne sat at his dining table, a massive slab of black Italian marble that could seat 12, now covered only with stacks of legal documents. The scent of fresh paper and expensive ink had replaced the faint, lingering perfume of betrayal. He signed the final page of the divorce decree. It was a clean, clinical severing of 5 years, devoid of the emotional mess that had characterized their confrontation. Julianne, cowed by the weight of the corporate espionage charges and the swift lien on her assets, had chosen to accept a minimal, pre-negotiated settlement in exchange for complete silence. She had vanished into the anonymous, aspirational strata of the city, a cautionary tale to her former friends. Next to the divorce papers lay the signed authorization to freeze Maya's multi-million-dollar trust fund. Lucas had established it with the explicit caveat that moral turpitude or intentional harm to the benefactor could lead to its dissolution. The legal grounds were solid. The emotional toll was absolute. He put down the pen. He was legally, financially, and emotionally clean. But he was also completely, utterly alone. The penthouse, stripped of the vibrant, ambitious energy of Julianne and the complicated, demanding presence of Maya, felt too large, too silent. It was a mausoleum of ambition. Every surface, every view, every piece of museum-quality art screamed of the wealth that had ultimately isolated him, turning his family into predators seeking a higher perch. The wealth was the scaffolding for the lie. Lucas walked to the wide window, looking out over the geometry of Manhattan. He had spent his life building magnificent structures for others, ensuring their foundations were sound, but he had ignored the structural integrity of his own home. He realized now that the special people were not the Vanderhovens with their lineage and political machinations. They were simply the people who had mastered the art of lying to themselves and everyone around them. The betrayal had taught him a profound, cold lesson. You could not buy love, and you could not architect a family. He had one last task. He called his real estate agent. "It's time, Mark," Lucas said, watching a flock of gulls circle a nearby spire. "List the penthouse. I want it sold, immediately. I'm done with the high ground." His agent was stunned. "Lucas, this is one of the most exclusive addresses."
I know what it is, Lucas interrupted softly. It's a reminder. I need a place where the air isn't so thin, Mark. Find me something with grass. Something where I can hear the rain, not just see it splatter against 200 feet of glass.
He was trading the status of the skyline for the solitude of the earth. The weeks blurred into a quiet, cold routine of work and reading. He initiated a new project at his firm, not another glittering tower for the elite, but a proposal for a major, sustainable public works project outside the city. It was something meaningful, something that wouldn't require a guest list or a social screening. One late afternoon, Lucas found a thick, square box left by a courier. It was from Maya. He carried it to his study, setting it on the desk next to the spot where Julianne had confessed her treachery. Inside was a single wedding album, thick, bound in white leather, embossed with the initials M, V, D, H. He hesitated, then opened it. The photographs were beautiful, flawless compositions of joy, opulence, and prestige. Every moment was captured. The immaculate tent, the expensive smiles, the forced laughter of the elite. He flipped through the pages quickly, his heart remaining calm. He paused on one candid shot of Maya walking down the aisle. She was beaming, looking forward. But his eyes were drawn not to Maya, but to Evelyn, his ex-wife, standing in the front row. Evelyn was not looking at Maya, she was looking directly at the camera, a look of profound, victorious satisfaction etched on her face, the true architect of the exclusion. Lucas gently closed the album. He did not feel anger, but a vast, empty pity for the women in his life who believed that happiness was a costume that could be bought and worn. He took the wedding album, walked to the fireplace, and set it on the cold hearth. He didn't burn it, he didn't deface it, he simply left it there, a monument to a perfect, beautiful lie. Lucas walked out of the study, locking the door behind him. He didn't look back at the room, at the view, or at the ghost of his past. He was finally ready to leave the toxicity of the special people behind. He was alone, yes, but for the first time in years, he was honest, structurally sound, and free. The wound was deep, but the healing had begun, not through forgiveness of others, but through the uncompromising truth of self-severance. He had lost his family, but he had found his foundation.